Hi, I'm Andy Smiley, your friendly podcast guide, and the podcast coach for moms who want to grow a podcast without burning out. I share practical podcast tips, stories from my own journey, and wisdom from some of the smartest podcasters out there. If you've ever wondered how people actually find your podcast, today we're covering the basics of podcast SEO, the simple strategies that make your show discoverable in podcast apps and on Google. And as always, at the end, I'll wrap up the episode with one clear next step so you know exactly where to start without feeling overwhelmed. Before we dive in, let me tell you something that completely shifted how I market my own podcast. This summer, I stopped chasing Instagram and leaned into Pinterest, and my show kept growing without me glued to my phone. One pin I made months ago has more than 6,000 views and is still sending listeners my way. If you're still not sure if Pinterest is right for you, grab my free 2-minute Is Pinterest Right For Me checklist to help you figure out if Pinterest is a good fit for you and your show. Pinterest and podcast SEO are two of my very favorite podcast marketing strategies because they keep working for you even when you're busy living your life. So let's dig into SEO now. There are 4 basic steps to figuring out your own podcast SEO. The first step is to brainstorm search phrases. Start by thinking about what your ideal listener is typing into the search bar when they're looking for the content that you create. For example, if you have a parenting podcast, your listeners are probably not searching positive reinforcement strategies. They're searching how to get my toddler to listen. So sit down, take about 10 minutes to write down as many of those phrases as you can think of that your listeners would be typing into Google or typing into the search bar of any podcast app. Next, step 2, you're going to use Google to expand your list. Take those phrases that you brainstormed and type them into Google, but don't press enter yet. Look to see what pops up in the drop-down before you press enter. That's Google showing you what real people are searching for that's related to what you typed in. So if you typed in toddler sleep, you might see toddler sleep regression or toddler won't nap. Make a list of 10 or so of these auto-populated phrases because these are the ones that you're going to be actually using in all of your content. Because you want to be using the phrases that your listeners are already using so that when they find you, it's a match made in heaven and there's no question that they're going to listen to your episode. Now, step 3 is to sprinkle those phrases and words everywhere. SEO experts call these phrases and words keywords, and honestly, I'm not really sure why they say keywords because most of them are more than one word, but here we are. The best thing to do is to work these keywords into your podcast title, show description, episode titles, and show notes. And don't worry, you don't have to rename your podcast. You can add a keyword after a colon. For example, my podcast used to be just Friendly Podcast Guide. Now it's Friendly Podcast Guide, teaching women how to grow a podcast without burning out. That little tweak makes my show significantly easier to find for my ideal listener. And step 4 is to repeat. Once you've got your list of keywords, use them everywhere. Episode titles, blog posts, Pinterest pins, even your Instagram captions. Anywhere your show shows up online, you want those keywords to be in the mix. And that's it. That is how you start using podcast SEO for your podcast. It really isn't as hard as you think it's going to be. It does take a little bit of time, but it is totally worth it. If you only do one thing this week, take 10 minutes to brainstorm a list of possible keywords. Just starting to think about the different phrases that your listeners are using when they're searching for you will make every piece of content that you create easier to find. If you had an aha moment today, chances are your podcaster friend would love to have that same light bulb moment. The best way to share it, take a quick screenshot of this episode and text it to them, or post it in your stories. I'd love to help all of your friends figure out this podcast SEO thing that everyone's been talking about. And don't miss next week's episode. I'm sitting down with one of my favorite Pinterest experts to talk about marketing your podcast on Pinterest. It's going to be packed with practical tips you can use right away. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week.